The Boy from Yesterday. Before we get to chapter 27, I'd like to just remind everyone to please leave a rating and a review and spread the word about the story to others who might enjoy hearing it. And now, chapter 27, Days Gone By. TJ and Emily stayed a moment to process what just happened and then asked Laurel and Tom if they would be all right for the night. Laurel didn't think that Christian would come back, and TJ texted Peter about what happened. TJ and Emily left, and Laurel and Tom went to their respective beds, more confused than ever. The next morning, Laurel was up especially early and went downstairs to find Tom already outside in the yard, outside the barn, kicking at the dirt with his shoes and pacing around. Laurel watched him a moment, unseen by Tom. She could see the frustration in the flush of his cheeks and the occasional grunt as he kicked the ground. "Morning," Laurel said. "You okay?" Tom looked up, relieved that she was up and out early. He instinctively tipped his cap, which made Laurel smile at the relentless Victorian manners that were so automatic with him. "I reckon we're at quite a mess, miss. I don't know how it all works now. Did we call the sheriff, report a missing magic ring?" Laurel shook her head and looked down at the ground herself. "I don't know if that would help. If we tried to explain the truth about why we needed the ring, they would never believe us, and we can't do much to prove it to them anyway. If we don't tell them why the ring is important, they would just treat it as a petty theft, and we would have to prove ownership and all that. We just need to buy some time. Christian is stuck with just a pretty ring if he doesn't really know how to use it," Laurel said, touching Tom's arm that moved into hugging him. After a moment, she released him. "Tom," she started hesitatingly, "I was thinking last night, after everything, what would it be like if you just stayed here, with me? Here, you're still young yet. We would both have our whole lives ahead of us. It's not your fault about Sam. You lived through the loss of your parents, and here, all the people you knew are already gone, one way or another, a long time ago. It's just nature's way. Maybe what Zeller was trying to do was to help you escape a time of illness and injury and give you an out, a rescue, into another time when you could live, for the most part, without those kinds of fears." Tom sighed in a combination of love for Laurel and wanting to be near her, and he wanted to be near her too, and a frustration that he had trouble getting Laurel to understand his point of view. "Laurel, I can't. Being from my time is who I am. It's how I grew up. Sam was there for me my whole life, and especially when my parents passed on, and Uncle Nate too." Tom was about to say, "and Mary too," but he hesitated, suddenly blushing that he had been kissing Laurel not long ago, with Mary back home in his time, feeling guilty that he was cheating, and yet the Mary he knew would have been long since dead by this time. His mind vacillated between thinking of his loved ones as he knew them, young and alive, and realizing that in this time, those people were just names on tombstones or in a genealogy diagram in the back of a family Bible. Tom shook his head, trying to find words to explain all the feelings at once. "This is like..." He couldn't find the words. "This is like I've been captured by a group of Injuns or pirates or the like, away from my home to some foreign land. It was as if I was kidnapped by them and taken away, and it's no different than being kidnapped by that..." He hesitated to curse in front of a lady. "Damned ring! I have to do all I can. Miss, I couldn't live with myself if I just let Sam die back home without trying to help him. And who knows what happens to the course of time if I don't go back from this time and try to save him. I can't let one more person in my life go, Laurel. Not without doing all I can under heaven. Not without a fight." Laurel paused a moment, seeing a look on Tom's face that showed he was dedicated to this mission, despite the love in his eyes that he saw for her. She admired his courage, and at the same time, his commitment to try to save Sam also meant a determination to leave her in a way that maybe he didn't realize. She wanted to say something, but instead she just teared up and bit her lip. Tom noticed. "Laurel," he went over to her and held her shoulders. "Is there any other way?" Laurel brushed her nose with her fingers and sniffed. "I don't know, Tom. We're just us, here, living today, now. Read the morning paper. Sam either got better or he died a long time ago. We just don't know. But if we knew that you going back, or not going back, wasn't going to make any difference, would you stay? It's not your fault. You didn't," she struggled to remember the story, "spook the horse? You didn't bury the rock in the ground that cut Sam. You didn't do anything that is in any way your fault about his accident. How can you leave with knowing that going back might not change what happened to him? Here, where we are now, we're together. Whatever happened back then, a very long time ago, we're together now. Isn't that enough?" Tom looked into Laurel's eyes and felt more confused than ever. She was so beautiful, and the thought of leaving those sparkling eyes behind wore on him too. Were they being selfish? Was it wrong for Laurel to want him and for him to want her? For the first time seeing the fresh leaves of spring budding on the trees, and this generation of birds in the air, the cars going by that were made just last year, he allowed himself to wonder if perhaps staying in 2020 was the right decision after all. Tom gave it some thought throughout the day. Marguerite and Clark were out, so he and Laurel spent the day alone talking more about the inventions around the house. Laurel trying to explain how they worked, as best she knew how, and Tom trying to recognize the house that he knew before so many remodels and the disappearance of many of the furnishings he knew there, thinking of how the fabrics had probably faded and rotted, all the pictures and bric-a-brac given away or sold through the generations. It was odd how a parlor that had been so full of the things of his time were all gone now, replaced by objects that people could not even dream of in his time. As they talked, Tom toyed with the remote control to the flat-screen TV, wondering how anyone uses all the tiny buttons and what they could possibly do. Laurel tried to demonstrate, and an old black-and-white movie about the Victorian era was on Turner Classic Movies. Tom was fascinated to see people on the screen move and talk and wear the clothes that he knew from his time. They didn't talk exactly like his family had, but they looked like them, except for some of the hairstyles. Tom laughed at the things he saw that the movie makers got wrong historically, but he enjoyed watching the movie. "Do they have more of these plays in that kind of magic box?" Tom asked. Laurel laughed and tried to explain how the plays in a box worked, but the more she tried, the more she just wanted to sit and watch on the sofa, Tom's arms around her as he watched the screen with wide eyes. They spent much of the day after in Laurel's room, doing still more online document searches, which helped Laurel explain some of the things Tom asked that she couldn't answer. This led to various discussions about 20th century history, and while Tom was fascinated to learn about the Titanic, World War I, World War II, airplanes, and later jet travel and the moon landing, there was also a feeling that there wasn't much either of them could do for now. The subjects were mostly crash courses in history for each of them. 20th century, which Laurel taught Tom, and 19th century, which Tom taught Laurel. Laurel was amazed at all the things Tom knew from being there that Laurel never got in history classes, and she had taken a lot of them. Tom told stories of people he knew from the Civil War, and the first telephones, and the first time he saw an electric light. Tom thought a moment when Laurel tried to teach him about World War II and the atomic bomb. Those things could kill millions of people? All at one time? Tom asked. Laurel nodded. Tom's heart sank and he had a sick feeling in the pit of his stomach. He had grown up with so many stories of the people in his family and whom his family knew that were lost to war and disease. He couldn't imagine that there was the capability for it to be so much worse. Tom wasn't sure that this was the world he wanted to live in. It sounded too scary and too modern. In that moment, he thought of just riding Chestnut in his time, a time of peace. He was disappointed and sad that apparently the modern world had not learned its lesson from the Civil War. How can a people who invent all these magic boxes and things that light up and make so much noise not also learn the lesson of the war between the states? There were a lot of things about this new world that he didn't like and would just as soon forego. Then he thought of Laurel and thought she was the best part of this odd new time, and decided he would focus on the time with her, not just because he was falling in love with her, but also because she was his hope of getting home. He didn't listen as much to the details of what she had to say about the modern inventions as much as he just appreciated watching her as she taught him, just being with this beautiful girl who made him feel at home. Later, Tom sat on a stool at the kitchen island while Laurel helped Marguerite start dinner by snapping the ends off green beans in a big glass bowl. "Usually, I would just nuke some from the microwave," Marguerite said, pointing to Laurel's bowl of beans but speaking to Tom. Tom didn't understand what in the world she was talking about. "But I wanted to make tonight special. I was just in the mood. I've been dry brining a turkey I got, vegetarian-fed, humanely raised, and organic, no less, at the New Good Earth Market in the strip mall down a few blocks by the Apple store. More expensive by the pound, sure, but not full of preservatives. I never do sodium nitrite. That stuff will kill you. That market has all kinds of things to try, I suppose, though I'm not sure what the difference is." Tom wasn't sure what to say, so he stuck with the basics. "Fresh beans always sound good to me," which he thought might sound stupid, but that was the best he could do for what she was saying. "What was that noise last night?" Marguerite said as she chopped some potatoes. "I thought I heard Christian voice. Are you guys back on?" she said, looking up over her reading glasses at Laurel. "No, Gran," Laurel said, "we're not. In fact, it's probably better if he's not around. I think he's not really doing that well." "Well, it's starting to get around that people have seen him drunk in town. Does he have some sort of drinking problem? I can't imagine him, of all people, but you never know. I can't imagine that from that picture-perfect family. Just make sure you're not riding in a car with him if he's been drinking." "Yeah, of course," Laurel said, trying to think of something to change the subject. She was saved by Clark coming home from the store. "Well, hello, guys and gals," Clark said, giving Marguerite a quick peck on the cheek and handing her a bouquet of daisies he'd picked for her on the way home from the big field and construction site across the street. Marguerite smiled. "Well, chivalry is not dead after all," and put them in some water. Tom just smiled at the exchange. Tom looked at Laurel from behind Marguerite's back and winked and shrugged. Clark rolled up his sleeves at the kitchen sink. "I'm going to clean up a bit. Long day at the store trying to get rid of some of that stuff and get cleaned up. You know, there is so much junk still back there, especially in the back room. I got a visit from a new appliance vendor last week, and he wants me to carry his new washer-dryer stackable combination. I didn't want to get into all that, but I figured I'd try something new to sell. I'm going to have to make some space for the floor models, though. Might open up the back room where all that junk is, all that old antique stuff. That doesn't sell that often, and it's just taking up space. Some of those trunks and books on the shelves are left over from when I bought the store from Ella. That stuff must have been there 100 years, I bet. I ought to sell it on eBay just to try to make something from it. Some poor fool would spend a fortune on that junk." Marguerite continued chopping but was listening. "Ha! eBay. I wonder if people really make any money selling stuff there. Sounds like all a big garage sale to me," Marguerite said. She looked up at Tom. "Do they do much eBay where you're from, Tom?" Tom swallowed and looked at Laurel, who was busy rinsing some beans with her back turned. He was on his own. "Well, I guess there's lots of things where I come from," Tom said, the best he could do, not knowing what Marguerite was really saying. What was an eBay? Marguerite saved him, flipping on more lights. "I can't see whether I'm chopping potatoes or the cutting board," she said, passing the oven and taking her oven mitts to remove the turkey in its foil roasting pan and setting it on the counter. She removed her oven mitts and picked up her coffee mug and put it in the microwave and programmed it for a few seconds. Tom watching the whole time, fascinated with how fast her fingers moved on the microwave keypad and all the beeps it made before it lit up and hummed. She took the mug out shortly after when the microwave beeped and shut the door with a hard click. No sooner had it closed, Tom at the table, Clark washing his hands, Laurel snapping beans, and Marguerite sipping her rewarmed coffee, and Sam the dog sniffing around the table underneath looking for crumbs, when the power went out and they were all plunged into darkness.